Hello everyone, my name is Roya and this is the TBR book tag. So I initially saw this book on Ariel Bissett's channel and her video is really funny. So I'll leave that linked down below, and I think the original tag came from a blog called A Perfection Called Books. So I'm going to leave that link down below as well. So this tag is just all about the books on your to be read pile. So the first question is, how do you keep track of your TBR pile? I don't really have any system of keeping track of them at all. I basically just this entire bookshelf to my right, whichever direction this is, I think this is right. This is entirely TBR books, and then to my left over here, there's a shelf and a half, basically about a shelf, that is also TBR books. And then this, I keep a bunch of hardcovers together because they just look good on the shelf together. So about half of these books on this shelf are TBR books as well, but I don't really keep track of them in any particular way because I don't feel like I have that many really. So the next question is your TBR mostly print or ebook? Mine is mostly print. I do have kind of an ebook TBR, but because I really only read ebooks in certain situations, I don't really pressure myself to get to those as much as I do the physical books, because, you know, with physical books, if I end up hating the book or something, I can give it away or like whatever. Whereas, you know, with an ebook, it doesn't really matter. Ebooks don't take up any space, any of that stuff. So anyway, how do you determine which book from your TBR to read next? I don't really keep track of that either. I essentially basically usually have a good idea of which books I want to get to soon. So right now I have a pretty good stack of what books to get to in kind of what order at the moment. So I'm never really in a situation where I just look at my shelf and go, what do I even read next? Because usually I already have kind of an idea. The next question is a book that's been on your TBR list the longest. That's a little bit hard to determine because certainly I'm pretty good at getting to most of the books on my TBR fairly soon after I get them, but then also the thing is too that most of the books on my TBR have been on this shelf for about the same amount of time as well, and it's really hard to determine kind of which ones have been there the longest. But one that comes to mind is definitely Lily by Patricia Gaffney. This is a really random book that I basically got this was given to me with a bunch of other books, and for some reason I just haven't gotten to this because I feel like I want to be in like a certain mood to read this, because it's an adult romance, and I do read romance books sometimes, but it's not my typical like go-to thing by any means. And so I kind of just like, I'm not pressuring myself to get to this one at any point. It's basically just there because eventually I'm gonna want to read it. I'm gonna be in the mood to read it. So that kind of depends. I feel like this one's been on my TBR the longest because it's been about 5 years, maybe 6. The next question is a book recently added to your TBR. So this is Ancillary Justice by Anne Leckie. I just got this at like on basically either the last day of 2019 or like the first day of 2020 or something like that. And this is like right at the top of my TBR list, but at the moment there are several books ahead of it because I want to review those books, and there were books sent to me for review and stuff like that, and stuff that I want to read before Y'all West, things like that. But this is like the very next thing that I really want to read. And so I kind of anticipate that I probably won't get to this for at least another month, maybe 2, but it's like right there at the top of the list, and I haven't had it for that long, and I'm really excited to get to it. Next question is a book added to your TBR strictly because of its beautiful cover. I can't say that I really do this. Typically, if something is on my TBR, it is not because of the cover, because certainly I've read enough books that had great, beautiful covers that I kind of thought were just books. And then there are, of course, books that have terrible covers, and I've read them and thought they were great books. So I really don't judge books by their cover by any means. A cover does not do very much for me in terms of whether I want to read the book or not. Typically, I mean, yes, a good cover is very eye-catching, but for the most part, that doesn't really factor into whether or not I want to read it. But I do have to say that The Well of Tears by Cecilia Dart Thornton definitely caught my eye because of the cover, because also it's a really thick book, and I had not heard anything about this series. This is actually the first one. This is the second one, and somehow like this one's so much thicker than this one. But essentially, the whole reason I ended up getting these two books is because I saw the second one and saw how thick it is, and I thought, wow, that must be a really good book with a lot to it. So basically, I guess that counts as a book that I wanted because of the cover. I have no idea. Here's iPod. She's chilling, being a cat. The next question is a book on your TBR that you never plan on reading, and I don't really get this question. I feel like it's the very definition of something being on your TBR means that you plan on reading it. So a book that you don't plan on reading or that you're probably never going to read is by definition not really on your TBR. However, I do have a couple of books that may actually fit this question. So firstly, I did get This Gulf of Time and Stars by Julie E. Cerneda, and this is actually, I thought this was the first book in a series, and it turns out it's the first book in a spin-off series, I guess. And so I actually tried to read this, and by page 2, I was already completely lost, just because there's a lot of information that you're supposed to already have going into this book that I didn't have. So I don't know when I'm gonna get to this book, because I had every intention of reading it, but then I like didn't realize that it's the first in actually a spin-off series and not really the first in a series. And then also similarly, Red Unicorn by Tanith Lee. This is the third book in a trilogy, and I've read the first one, Black Unicorn, but essentially this series is out of print. I've not read the second one, nor have I found it anywhere. It's kind of one of those books where you kind of have to be like really actively looking online or something, or like on the Amazon marketplace or something like that, to be able to find it. So I don't know, since this isn't a huge priority, but at the same time, I would like to read this at some point, but I have to read the second one first, which I don't have. It's a miracle that I even have this one, that I even was able to find this one at a used bookstore somewhere. So, because the second two books in the series are really hard to find pretty much anywhere, because the whole series is out of print, but especially this one and the second one. So I don't have the second one, so I don't know when I'm going to get to this one. The next question is an unpublished book that you're excited for. So, the sequel to Darius the Great is not okay. It's called Darius the Great Deserves Better, and I'm really, really excited for it, because a couple of years ago, Darius the Great is not okay was seriously one of my favorite books of that year, and it was so good. So that comes out this fall, and I'm so excited to read it. It's stupid how excited I am. And then the next question is a book on your TBR that everyone's read but you. It's pretty difficult, because a lot of my TBR here is really obscure fantasy books, but I do feel like Shades of Milk and Honey by Mary Robinette Kowal is one that a lot of my friends here on BookTube have read by now, and I have not. A book on your TBR that everyone recommends to you. There are, I would say, it's kind of hard to determine whether people, because usually if people keep recommending me something, I've already read it. But I do feel like a lot of people have good things to say about Inda by Sherwood Smith, and this is also another thing that's like right at the top of the list of what to read next, but there are just several books that I want to get to ahead of this one. But a lot of people definitely do talk about this book a lot, so it makes me really excited to read it. And I've read a few of Sherwood Smith's other books, and her books are always really good, so I'm definitely really excited to get to this. A book on your TBR that you're dying to read. So I've mentioned several books in this video already that are ones that I'm dying to read, but one I haven't mentioned yet is Taxing Courtship by J.C. Jarvis. This is another book that is like right at the top of the list that I really want to get to soon, and I actually met the author just at the end of last year, because our booths were next to each other at an event, so and then we traded copies of our books, because I wanted to read hers and she wanted to read mine. So but yeah, so I'm definitely really excited to get to this book. It's a fantasy romance, and you guys know how much I love fantasy romance, so yeah. And the last question is, how many books are on your TBR shelf? So I currently have just over 150 books. It's like 154 or something like that, books on my shelf that I have not read. That number is probably going to change, even once this video goes up. I mean, I have not been buying any books this year at all. Certainly some books have been sent to me for review and stuff like that, but I haven't been buying any books. So I'm hoping that list of books that I plan to get to will shrink a little bit in the coming months here. So hopefully by the end of the year it'll be like just 100 or less. But I don't really care that much. I don't want to like have it dwindle to like nothing, because I definitely do want to have enough books on my shelf that that I don't have to like wonder what to read. There will be something that like speaks to me in that moment, that kind of thing. But I do feel like over 150 books that are unread on my shelf is a little bit much. But anyway, so yeah, that is the TBR book tag. Definitely let me know in the comments what book you are most excited to get to and how you keep track of your TBR, if you have any sort of way of keeping track of it. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you very soon with a new video. Bye!